Drowning in debt, Michael's Italian restaurant was on its last legs when he spotted a stray dog scattering garbage behind his kitchen. Overwhelmed by frustration, he lashed out, kicking the animal into the alley. Days later, a pack of barking strays surrounded his restaurant, driving away his remaining customers. When Michael stayed overnight to prepare a catering order, the dog's true purpose became clear. The streets of Little Italy had never been kind to dreamers, and Michael Spencer was learning this lesson the hard way. His small Italian restaurant, Bella Nota, represented everything he had ever worked for. 3 years of savings had vanished into renovations. Countless sleepless nights had been spent perfecting recipes handed down through generations. Even his marriage had collapsed under the weight of his obsession with making this restaurant work. 6 months after the grand opening, the dream was fading fast. The books showed numbers that made Michael's stomach turn. Each week brought fewer customers through the door, and more bills piled up on his desk. Tuesday evenings were typically slow, but this particular Tuesday felt like the universe was sending him a message, a cruel one to close up. Before he could process this loss, a health inspector arrived unannounced. The man moved through his kitchen with a clipboard and a permanent frown, finding violations in places Michael swore were spotless that morning. The inspector left him with a warning and a list of costly corrections needed before a follow-up visit next week. Exhausted and defeated, Michael stepped into the back alley for a moment of fresh air. That's when he saw it, a scruffy, mangy mutt with matted fur digging through his dumpster. The dog had knocked over several bags, scattering garbage across the already cited back alley. Rotting food and broken containers littered the ground that Michael would now have to clean before morning. Something inside him snapped. All the frustration, the fear, and the failure of the past months were channeled into a white-hot rage directed at this innocent animal. Michael stormed toward the dog, shouting and waving his arms. The stray paused, regarding him with curious eyes that showed no fear. This only fueled Michael's anger. He advanced on the animal, continuing to yell. When the dog didn't immediately run away, Michael's control slipped entirely. His foot connected with the animal's rib cage in a sharp, cruel kick. The dog yelped in pain and surprise, scampering down the alley with its tail tucked between its legs. Michael stood breathing heavily, watching it disappear into the darkness. Morning brought a new day, but the same problems. Michael arrived early to clean the alley before preparing for the lunch service. The lunch crowd was modest but steady. Business people from nearby offices and tourists wandering off the main avenue. Michael was just beginning to feel a glimmer of hope when it happened. A cacophony of barking erupted outside the restaurant windows. Michael froze in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room. There, pacing on the sidewalk in front of his restaurant, was the dog he had kicked, now accompanied by 3 other strays of various sizes and breeds. They moved in a coordinated pack, growling and barking at anyone who approached the entrance to Bella Nota. 2 elderly customers preparing to enter quickly turned away, hurrying down the street. A family with young children crossed to the opposite sidewalk. Within minutes, potential diners were actively avoiding the entire block. Michael rushed outside, trying to shoo the animals away. They retreated a short distance but refused to leave completely. Each time he returned inside, they resumed their positions, forming a barrier between his restaurant and any possible customers. This bizarre siege continued for days. The dogs would appear at random intervals, sometimes 4 of them, sometimes as many as 7. After a week of this strange standoff, Michael's business was in critical condition. Friday evening, what should have been his busiest service, saw only 2 tables seated. The staff stood idle, exchanging worried glances as Michael calculated whether he could make next week's payroll. A large catering order for a nearby office's Saturday lunch function offered a sliver of hope. If he could fulfill this order perfectly, it might lead to regular business from the firm. Michael decided to stay overnight at the restaurant to prepare the sauces and pasta from scratch. He couldn't risk any more disruptions. Just after 2 a.m., with most of the prep work complete, Michael paused to rest. The restaurant was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerators. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Metal scraping against metal, coming from the back door. At first, Michael thought the dogs had returned, perhaps scratching at the delivery entrance. But this sound was different, more deliberate, more threatening. Moving quietly through the kitchen, Michael peered toward the back of the restaurant. His blood ran cold. 3 men in dark clothing were working to pry open the delivery entrance. One held a crowbar while the others kept watch. These weren't dogs, they were burglars. Michael reached for his phone to call the police. In his haste and terror, his elbow knocked against a stack of metal pots. They crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter. The back door burst open. The men rushed in, quickly spotting Michael frozen in the kitchen. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Michael backed away until he hit the counter. The nearest man lunged forward but suddenly howled in pain. A blur of fur and teeth had latched onto his leg. The stray dog, the very one Michael had kicked days earlier, had somehow entered through the open door and was now fiercely attacking the intruder. Within seconds, more dogs poured in. Each targeted one of the burglars, biting down hard on their legs and arms. The men screamed and tried to flee, but the dogs held firm, their jaws locked onto the intruders, preventing any escape. Michael, seizing the opportunity, grabbed his phone and called the police. He explained the situation, his voice shaking with adrenaline. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside the restaurant. As officers entered with weapons drawn, the dogs, as if understanding the situation perfectly, released their hold on the bleeding intruders and backed away. They sat calmly against the wall, watching as police handcuffed and arrested all 3 men. Michael stood in a stunned silence as the officer remarked how lucky he was that those dogs had been there. The police collected statements and evidence, took photographs, and eventually left with the 3 criminals in custody. Alone again in his restaurant, Michael noticed the dogs still sitting quietly in the corner. They made no move to leave. It was as if they were waiting for something. Later that morning, reviewing his security footage, Michael discovered that his dogs had been patrolling outside his restaurant every night, guarding it from the burglars. Understanding dawned on Michael. The dogs hadn't been trying to ruin his business by scaring away customers. They had been warning him. They had sensed the danger posed by the burglars who had been casing the neighborhood. That evening, after closing up, Michael prepared a special meal. He cooked fresh pasta and seasoned leftover meats from the day's service. He carried the platters outside to find the pack waiting patiently in the alley. As he set down the food, the dog he had kicked approached cautiously. Michael knelt slowly, extending his hand in peace. After a moment's hesitation, the dog moved forward, gently licking his fingers. The simple gesture of forgiveness brought tears to Michael's eyes. Now Michael makes it a daily ritual to prepare special meals for his unexpected guardians. Word spread quickly about the incident. Local news picked up the story of the restaurateur saved by stray dogs, and suddenly Bella Notte became the most popular Italian restaurant in the neighborhood. Customers flocked in, hoping to catch a glimpse of the heroic pack. What began as the worst period of his life had transformed into something beautiful, a silent understanding between a man and the animals he once feared, but now considers family. What would you do if you discovered that what you perceived as an enemy was actually your guardian angel in disguise?